Hey mama, in the hospital, there are some timelines that you're likely to be on as a birthing mama. One of those is pushing time. And I've been part of births where moms are pushing for 2 to 3 hours and then providers come in and say a C-section is now necessary. And since I want you to be as ready and as empowered as much as possible, we're going to talk all about it. And at the end, I'm going to give you my top 3 tips for pushing that I use with all my clients. I'm Bridget, a childbirth educator and a birth doula, and it's my passion to equip parents to have their happiest, healthiest pregnancies, births, and postpartum periods as possible. If you're new, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you are in the loop for all future videos that come your way. All right, so what do we do if providers come in and say, all right, it's time to meet your baby. You've been pushing for 2-3 hours now, and it's time. You want to keep your baby safe and you're tired. Let's do a C-section. What do we do? Well, let's first look at the physiologic side of pushing in labor and then the studies about prolonged pushing, and we're going to break it down from there. So the second stage of labor is when your cervix is fully dilated to 10 centimeters until your baby is born. It's what's referred to as the pushing stage. However, from a physiologic standpoint, the second stage or the pushing stage is really when mom feels the urge to push and her body usually initiates that fetal ejection reflex until the birth of her baby happens. Your body isn't measuring labor progress in centimeters of cervical dilation, but rather your baby's cues in your hormonal cocktail that is driving birth. Physiologic providers usually define the second stage of labor differently than medically trained providers do because they aren't doing those routine cervical exams to determine mom's progress in labor by the cervix. They are basing mom's progress on her external cues and behaviors and leaning into her intuition for where she is in labor. So mama, if you're allowing your provider to do routine cervical exams, you might be ushered into that second stage of labor earlier than what your body and baby are truly ready for, and that might put you on the clock. Now let's look at what the studies say. According to ACOG, a second stage is prolonged if you're a first-time mom pushing longer than 3 hours and longer than 2 hours if you've given birth before. With an epidural, these parameters are extended because epidurals can increase the length of the pushing stage. However, with that being said, ACOG also says, and I quote, an individualized approach should be used to diagnose second stage arrest. An individual patient preference is recommended when time in the second stage is extended beyond these parameters, which means a 2 to 3 hour cutoff time for pushing is not a hard and fast rule. It's a guideline, and it should be treated as such. A large study published in 2010 found that even when the pushing stage lasted over 3 hours, the vast majority of women still gave birth vaginally without major complications. But complications do exist. And these complications are postpartum hemorrhage, 3rd and 4th degree tears, and infection for mom. However, in these studies, many of these women were induced, had epidurals, and had other interventions like cervical exams that could have contributed to the increase of these poor outcomes. For baby, lower APGAR scores and higher admission rates into the NICU are associated with longer pushing stages. One study found that for first-time moms who push for 3 hours or more, the overall rate of newborn complications is about 2.5%. But again, this has nuance. There is no way of knowing if these complications arise because of prolonged pushing alone, or if there's an underlying factor that contributed to a longer push time and also to the newborn's health complications. If you want to take a look at these studies, I've linked them down below. So the possibility of these risks are one factor contributing to your provider's recommendation for a C-section after 2 to 3 hours of pushing. But there are other things at play too. First, the hospital's policies. Many facilities treat ACOG's time guidelines as a strict limit, not as a guideline. And this is why if you hit that 2-hour mark, staff may start prepping for surgery even if you and your baby are doing just fine. Second, there's fear of litigation. Providers may push for a C-section for the just-in-case scenario, even without a clear medical reason, because they're afraid of being blamed if something does go wrong later. Remember, hospitals are under the power of insurance and ultimately lawyers. Third, shift changes and scheduling. Sometimes, unfortunately, decisions and recommendations for your labor and birth are made based on provider availability or convenience, not necessarily your body's ability and your labor's process. And fourth, sometimes there's a lack of patience and training in physiologic birth. If you're told to push right when you're 10 centimeters and you're encouraged to be flat on your back and holding your breath and you're pushing in a coached, forceful way, you're actually working against your body's design. But if you are upright and mobile and vocalizing with your pushes, you're working with your body and with your baby. And I teach you how to work with your physiology all throughout labor in the Built to Birth course, which is linked up here in the corner as well as down below. And yes, even then, if you're doing all of those things, sometimes you will need that coached pushing, and it won't be this easy, effortless birth. It might take hours and hours, but in a calm environment where you and your baby are being carefully monitored and you have the freedom and support to labor as you need to, your baby has a very good chance of being born vaginally without major complications, even if it takes some time. The longest that I've personally spent with a mama pushing in labor was 5 hours. She was at home, she ended up having a vaginal birth, and she and her baby were happy and healthy after. But I do know midwives who spent longer time pushing with their clients, so it is possible. Now, if baby is showing signs of distress or there is no progress during pushing despite using position changes and other support, or if mom is just exhausted, then you may want to consider vacuum forceps or even a C-section for the birth of your baby. But prolonged pushing alone without any complications is not a reason to rush into surgery. Now, let me tell you my top 3 tips to be as effective of a pusher as possible. Number 1, use gravity to your advantage to bring your baby down and out. Get upright and change positions frequently till you find something that works for you and your baby. Number 2, listen to your body's urges to push. If you're not feeling those urges, it might not be time to push yet. And this waiting period between being 10 centimeters dilated and actually pushing is called laboring down. And 3, use open glottis pushing breathing techniques. I teach you this in the video that's linked up here in the corner. Bonus tip, you can also use a mirror to help you see your pushing efforts at work, and you can use your hand to feel for your baby's head so you know where to send your pushing power. So mamas, that wraps up this video about pushing. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, share it with your mama friend, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.